Welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 20th of July 2022 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and The Moore Show. And I encourage you again to look at his YouTube channel, The Kevin Moore Show, and look at the latest offering in terms of his docu-series They Call Us Channelers. Lots of excellent extra information coming out there and lots of different qualities of channelers. So this lecture is a carry-on, part two of the incarnation process that we started in June. And in this instance, it's the end of the incarnation process. In June, I described the way the soul enters into the body, the human vehicle, and other incarnate vehicles of the gross physical manifestation level, and how the sentience and the energy enters into the body and moves around to various different locations, seats itself, and then starts to be able to animate and control the body for as long as the incarnation is in operation. With the demise process, basically, once the soul, the aspect, I'll call it an aspect, it's just a smaller aspect of the true energetic self, which is also sometimes called a Godhead in Hindu texts, or the Oversoul, or the higher self. All these words mean the same thing. Once the aspect has finished its incarnation, that being it's achieved all the aspects of its goals, or it's in fact chosen to use a standard termination juncture to end the incarnation. A termination juncture is a point in the incarnation where there is no downstream evolutionary effects associated with that soul in that body if the incarnation is finished. So it's like a baseline where things are finished. And if that's happened, or the body is worn out and looking to demise naturally through organ failure, or whether there's an accident as part of the experience associated with leaving the incarnation, or whether the incarnation involved some form of disease that means that the body starts to fail, there is then the chance or the time for the soul or the aspect to leave the body in a reverse way in which it entered into the body. So when the body is close to demise or is about to demise, the sentience associated with the aspect moves away from the soul seat, which is behind the front heart chakra, and moves down to the location of the Tantien, which is in effect the junction of the separation of and the joining of sentience and energy, the associated energy with the sentience. Once it's reached the Tantien, or Dantien, depending upon how you say it and which part of the world you're from, the energy that animates the body moves away from the core star, and the core star is not too far away from the Tantien. So then it moves back into the Tantien, and the sentience and the energy are co-joined as per its usual configuration when it's in the energetic. At that point, the accumulation of sentience and energy moves back up the Hara line. If you remember, the Hara line is a hypodermically small tube, which is panfrequential and connects the aspect or the soul to the true energetic self, and maintains that contact with it. Now, even though the communicative bandwidth is significantly reduced because of the low frequencies that were here, there was always contact with our higher self, and therefore there was always contact with the true energetic self, the aspect, and of course source. So it moves towards the Hara line and moves into this hypodermically small tube, which is panfrequential, and moves back towards the higher frequency. So it moves up through the Hara line, passing the location of the crown chakra, and starts to move up the frequencies past the 8th, 9th, and 10th, which are the step down function that allows the aspect at a higher frequency to step down its frequencies and therefore enter into the body, and moves up into the higher frequencies associated with the natural evolutionary level of the true energetic self. Now then, at some point there may be a midway point, but in essence, for those individuals who've experienced this or may experience it, the feeling may be, if there is consciousness involved with the transition of the aspect or soul through to the origin, the current location, I should say, of the true energetic self within the multiversal environment, there may be a feeling of passing through a tunnel. And there may be a feeling of light at the end of the tunnel, because when we move into the frequency or the universal location of the true energetic self within the multiverse, it'll move into an area which is so high frequency, there's nothing can be observed in the normal way. And so, in essence, the body dies, the solar aspect moves out up the Hara line, through and back into the normal evolutionary location within the multiverse, or I should say universe, within the multiverse that the true energetic self exists within. Now, once that's happened, the aspect or soul can maybe, and ideally straight away, but may take some time, enter back into communion of some sort, one of the different forms of communion that it can afford, or it can stay external to the true energetic self in a form of extended communion, maybe desirably, or maybe it needs to detach itself totally from the condition of being in the conditioning of being in and around the earth plane. So the aspect of soul may even create an environment around them that represents what they either expected to experience when their body demised, or if they haven't quite understood that their body has demised, they may in fact create an environment which is a copy of the environments that they were in during the end of their lifetime. Now, before the body demises and the soul moves out, it is possible that there are other entities, such as the guide and helpers, that assist that soul out of the body and making its transition easier. And those aspects of the guide or the helpers may well decide to use a form factor, which won't be, of course, gross physical, but may be perceived as being gross physical by the individual whose body is demising, that it represents one of their family members or loved ones that is there to help them along. Now, that's not to say that sometimes a soul may elect to stay or come back close to the earth location, the earth frequency, to assist another soul out of the body if they've worked with them, or maybe they're a sympathetic soul. But it's quite usual for the guide and helpers to be there, and they may use a remembered individual or a loved individual as a means of creating a friendly environment for them to come out. So in that instance, it's quite common for people to move out faster if they can recognize a parent or a sibling or a loved one, or even maybe a child that they've had that moved out of their incarnation before them. So it's quite likely that this will happen and makes it easier for them to move out of that body. And once they've moved into the energetic and they've either established that the environment around them is not the real environment, and they've moved out of it and recommuned with their true energetic self, or they've bypassed that because they understand that their body is demised and therefore they're fully alert when they move out and they recommune or stay external to their true energetic self, they may elect to go through the so-called review process, which in essence is the soul or the aspect together with the guide and the helpers, just reviewing how their interaction with each other and with the environment that the aspect or soul has incarnated into went, how efficient it was, how many of the goals associated with their life plan did they meet, how accurately were they met, how much karma has been accrued, how much karma has been removed, what could be used next time in terms of experience, what is best to be experienced again because the quality of the experience wasn't as good as it could have been, or what was more than expected. And so the plans for the next life, well, not as the case maybe, can be decided there. So that's the end of the incarnation process. That's like the disincarnation process, if you call it, and it's a very mechanical method of understanding it. There's lots of other different stories of how it appears, but from my basic recollection from what was described to me by Anne when I was writing the Anne dialogues and what I observed, this is the most accurate method that I've an observation that I've experienced or read about in my particular incarnation. And it seems to ring true with some of the other experiences that other people have written about or experienced as well. The one thing you probably do need to understand is that when we do move away from the gross physical, we start to experience our functionality in the way it's supposed to be experienced, such as we start to see things spherically. We start to understand all of the experiences that we've had in previous lives. We can remember everything faithfully. We can go into communion with any other entity as well instantaneously. We can move our sentience around the multiversal environment or part of it that we're in instantaneously. The constraints of the physical are stripped away from us, and so we start to experience things in the way that we normally are. And it's only then that we start to realize how constrained and how difficult it was to be in our particular incarnation. And you might wonder why we ever decide to do it again, but we do. And we think of it in a completely different way to how we would think about it when we actually incarnate in the human body or other bodies. In essence, we see it as just a brief moment, not even a blip in our existence, and that the experiences that we classify as being difficult or unfair or harsh or hard are simply classified as experiences and are given to us or taken as an opportunity to accelerate our evolution. So let's move on to the questions and answers. So welcome everybody to the questions and answers session of this July Satsanga. And we've got a number of different people here, and also we've already got a group of questions that was given to me before the Satsanga itself. So let's see if I can. First part. First one by Faith. There's about 5 questions here. One of the questions was actually answered privately because it made more sense to answer it privately. So first one is, who is Archangel Michael that many souls channel on earth? I am asking about his level role and what dimension. Is this entity a creation of our source in this dimension? Well, basically, some of these entities that we classify as being angels are actually curators. And some of them are what we would classify as being ascended masters. And when they're at that level, they don't, although they have a level associated with their evolutionary content, it's difficult to track them down because they move around. And so I could say that in effect, this individual entity would be at a certain level one day, and it might be somewhere else the next day. So that might confuse things. And one of the things that I haven't mentioned, because it happens rarely, is there are times when our true energetic selves, or our Godhead or Oversoul, actually splits itself over a number of different levels to act as a step down function. Specifically, if they're normally at a higher level and they want to try and maintain a contact with that level, whilst also getting close enough to make it more reasonable for them to incarnate as well. So that's why we sometimes see true energetic selves being in 2 and possibly 3 or 4 different levels at the same time. Okay, so basically it's a curator. It's one of the individuals who is here to help manage what we're doing here with our individualized free will, and hope that we can move beyond the need to be individually materialistically, and move around. But they're in around the 5th and 6th frequent full dimensions. Okay, next question. Okay, what do you think about the invention of planet wave, whereby we can hear plant wave, where we can hear plant sounds by connecting specific electrons or the connected to the plants or tree or leaf or mushrooms, etc. When we connect the clips to the plants, each plant sings and they all sound differently. It is, in my understanding, very understood, and it's quite common knowledge that plants do experience different levels of sentience, albeit they're a couple of levels below we are. They are connected together. And so a plant or a plant type or a tree type that's in one location will be connected to similar or same plant or tree types in other locations around the world. So they do communicate with each other because they are connected via the earth, and they can experience joy, because if we love them, we nurture them, they experience joy and they flourish. And if they're ignored, they do experience, anxiety and concern as well. So whether this device actually gives us the accurate level of response that we would expect, I would doubt. But it would definitely give us the potential to say that they are experiencing some level of connectivity with us, and that can be detected in some way, albeit not accurate right now. The best way to connect with anything is through meditation, certainly with things like trees and plants, and of course animals. Okay, next question. With the current US political and legal system downstream by taking away people's rights and this current domination of Christian values based on interpretation of minority fanatics, where is the US heading? Where will be the US in 50 years' time based upon strongest possibilities? Will India, currently, in brackets, currently has corrupt politics, and China, currently an authoritarian government, with the new world powers, and how will that affect the Earth's frequencies? All of these things are, in effect, they're like, if you have a frying pan and you have so for instance, a mixture that gives you like a waffle or something on top of it, and as it gets hotter, it sort of bubbles up. This is where the whole of the waffle or the mixture is starting to get to the same temperature but at a different time. So it gets to a certain temperature, may break, it vents, and then drops down again in another area, starts to get to the same temperature, it breaks and vents. So for instance, we've had this pancake and it starts to bubble in certain areas, equivalent to areas where we are experiencing difficulties, for example. And these things will move up and down depending upon how the individuals within the environments respond. Now, my understanding is that collectively we will change at some point, but that collectiveness needs to be affected locally as well. And so there will be levels of so-called New World Order that will gravitate towards certain levels of leadership in certain parts of the world. But the overall level of world order will eventually be one that is consistent with the governance of the earth in a so to say a long-term view, considering that we need to perpetuate the human race, and also making sure that the human race can continue to be perpetuated by making sure that we don't overpopulate it and overpollute it, and that therefore we do things in a correct way. So there may be areas where we end up being more American, more Chinese, more Indian. We've already been more English, we've already been more Roman, we've already been more Atlantean. So these things will come and go, but eventually we'll flatline and we'll become collectively more mature together. And so the local frequencies can go up and down, and the Earth's frequencies can go up and down. And when we take our eye off the ball, or we become, for want of a better word, complacent, then the frequencies go down. Sometimes in local areas, but it can be in global areas as well. Next question from Faith. I think this is not accepting all the text actually. Genetic modifications on humans and produce are fast growing. Are we going to witness the destruction of humanity like doomed inhabitants? We've always genetically modified our crops. We just don't recognize it. So when we select the best of things like the wheat and the barley and the corn, and we eat the worst, then we are selecting the genetically best product and putting it back in the ground. So by default, we select the best, to be able to continue to create the best and expand the potential crop. So we're not going to witness that the humanity being doomed, but we're going to be able to understand genetically how we function better, and how those, shall we say, cereals and other things upon the earth that we depend upon can be managed. But right now we're just playing with it. We're playing very blindly. We don't understand it. We need to understand the total ecosphere before we can start to make changes that are reasonable, shall I say, and robust, and are going to maintain the status quo whilst giving us crops that are useful to us but not poisonous, or not going to disturb the balance in terms of this grows versus that grows, because we've genetically modified the one but we've not the other. It's the same with introducing things like insects and animals. Where there's a balance, there's a balance. But when we add in something else, like for instance in the UK it was the grey squirrel starts to overtake the population of the red squirrel because the grey squirrel is more aggressive. So we have to understand how nature works, and then we won't be doomed. We'll be significantly more capable of being able to perpetuate our food stocks. Now there is one more question here. I'm going to put it on the chat first, and I'll come back to others. Copy. What is the projection for democracy and freedom from religious regimes for countries of places like Iran or Saudi Arabia? And that also includes, by the way, Christianity as well, because all regimes that are based upon, shall we say, a means of controlling people by surreptitious means, or the promise of something that they can't actually deliver because they haven't got the capability of doing it, is again doomed to failure eventually when people find out. So my understanding is that religion will start to disappear, but some ways of living will be perpetuated. And some of those ways of living are basically revolve around Buddhism, for example, or meaningfulness or mindfulness, and meditating as well, or some of the Hindu methods. But the lack of understanding surrounding deities and the worship of deities will be recognized, and a more scientific understanding of spirituality or metaphysics will start to become more available for people to see, and they'll start to see that they can start to contact higher entities through basic techniques which have been around a long time but have been ignored or hidden, basically, and that will surpass the need for, so I say, low-grade control of people with the promise of providing something that they can't do because they haven't got the tools to do it. So eventually we will move away from that, but again, it will take some time. I've got Harold's questions next, and I'll move very quickly on to the others. I think Harold's are quite quick to answer, actually, so we'll get a move on. Right. During the last Satsanga, a question was raised about whether we should stop the use of fossil fuels. Your response was, it is good to stop the use of anything creating a condition where we are damaging our environment, as well as the human body, and what we would personally consume. He said he totally agrees. However, on numerous occasions when innovations have been introduced through individuals to advance the world beyond using those harmful technologies and pharmaceuticals, those individuals have been killed, or their innovations have been sabotaged or even destroyed by governments or corporations that want to protect their ability to create profit off these damaging technologies and pharmaceuticals we currently use. And he gives an example here. Twice a hydrogen engine prototype, and I remember this, has been created, and both times the inventors were killed or disappeared. The last one occurred during the mass shooting at a grocery store in Buffalo, where Aaron Salter Jr., who had a patent pending on an engine that ran on water, was killed. Not a coincidence. Not a coincidence, were we? Then a man named Sorry, Zoom can't cope with a lot of text when you're putting it on there. Okay. Let's get that. Paste and send. Okay. When a man named Moses West was designed a machine that generated thousands of gallons of free drinking water per day using water vapor and the atmosphere. Placed a working press top of the machine in Flint, Michigan, where the tap water was deliberately polluted and remained polluted to kill the population with no government intervention. His machine was strategically sabotaged and rendered unusable. Many medical innovations and cures have been introduced, and their innovators killed or threatened into silence. How do we combat that? Well, basically, there has to be a push from us to really want to have different types of innovations that benefit us. Clearly, there's lots of dollars and pounds and everything else that's available to us to really perpetuate the wrong way of thinking. Lots of people, lots of governments, lots of individuals feed money into governance and therefore perpetuate the spiral of perpetuating revenue to governments that's based upon technologies or functions that are immoral or unsustainable. And so those individuals who provide an alternative are breaking the mold. Now, if in the past, when we first started to use things like petrochemicals, for example, all of these other technologies arrived at the same time, then we would be in a multi-energy production modality. And so because these things have come up late, and think then people like Tesla, for example, was also out of fashion as well, hence his technology didn't actually manifest in the way it should have done, then we are basically not in a position where we could have multimodal energy manufacture. We've got that could be done in the house, but we've got this big corporations now. And so what's happening is really there is a condition where we need to sort of support people who have these inventions. So if we see something that this is of note and it looks like it's going to provide an alternative and a safer alternative and a cleaner alternative method of getting power, then we should pay the price for that technology, such as solar power, which never pays itself back in most of our lifetimes, but is providing clean energy or heating our water in a cleaner way than by using electricity or using, in some instances, other methods to generate the heat. So the way I see it is that if you can afford to do it, pay for the more expensive method of generating electricity, because it supports the perpetuation of inventions that need to have the cash flow, basically. And it's only when they continue to have the cash flow will they start to overtake these big multinational corporations. Well, I hope that answers all those questions from Faith and from Michael. Let's go back to Ola, who's asking a question on the percentage of backfill people in our world. I said it was 41% in 2020. What is it now? It's about 55%. I was thinking the other day that the rise of the backfill people was an interesting comment that I made that was almost said in jest, but it really is the rise of the backfill people, and you can see it all over the world, where people are driving without due care and attention. They're doing things without concern for themselves or their children or their parents. They're eating food which isn't good for them. They're doing pastimes which is thrill-seeking. It's extremely materialistic. And those who are of higher sentience, although they might indulge in some of these things, realize at some point there's not the way forwards to perpetuate a more mature way of thinking, behaving, and acting, and therefore evolve. So with the rise of the backfill people, because the more people who start to become more mature, they start to rise to the frequencies and either depart their incarnation naturally, or they start to move into the frequencies that we can't normally perceive. They're still there, but they just only interact with those other incarnates that are of that higher frequency rather than lower frequency, unless they actually want to interact with those of a lower frequency. So the percentage of the backfill people sort of done that compared to the more highly intelligent, or should I say, the higher sentience, those with the higher quality of sentience. Now, if you remember, the backfill people are in between the sentience associated with the standard incarnate human being and the animals. So they're in the middle, and their ability to experience free will, individualized free will, hasn't been available to them until very recently, maybe the past 50 years. So that's why we're starting to see their volumes increasing, because as the number of individuals starts to decrease, who've got higher levels of sentience, then those who've got lower levels of sentience starts to increase. We start to see a change in population. So it's growing ridiculously fast. And so 55% in 2, what's that? That's 14% in 2 years. It's really quick. Is Saturn a gross physical planet or just an image? Please answer it in a Satsanga setting for us all to hear. Saturn is a higher frequency body, but it's still a physical body. So it's not an image as such. It's just that it's mostly gaseous, and as therefore is a higher frequency, but not so high that it's outside of our visual range. Well, that's a simple answer to that question, basically. If we go slightly higher than the gas, we go into things like the visual frequencies, and then past that we go into the thought frequencies, telepathic frequencies. Then we start to go into the fourth level frequencies, and so those we can't see. Then obviously there's gases that we can't see because they're too diffuse, and there's those that we can't see because their frequency is far too high. And normally diffuse gases and the level of diffuseness, use my bad English, is usually in concurrence with the frequency as well. Okay. Is our ancestral trauma programmed into the DNA of the cells of our physical body? How do we resolve these issues, all these programs? Ancestral trauma is something we create ourselves. The only thing we pull from one life to another is a karmic link between individuals, or a karmic link between ourselves and what we've experienced in previous lives, like how we've demised, for example, or a need to be able to respond correctly in a particular way, in a particular circumstance, in a particular environment. So we don't get anything passed through to us genetically between lives. It just doesn't work. Although we do get karma, which is passed through spiritually or energetically. So if we say we've got family karma, well, we might get karma that's between us as a family, and we've been incarnated together to sort it out. But in reality, there is nothing in the DNA that does that. It's just DNA is a function of programming the human body to perform in a certain way for a certain longevity, and it's controlled by the energy templates, and the interface is the RNA. So there's no, people say this about DNA, oh, we've got this certain DNA. It's just a physical function. It's not actually anything that carries across karma. So actually karma's next. If we come here with no karma, does having a child automatically create karma, or can we dissolve it while we incarnate? Having children creates karma for one specific reason. It's responsibility, and we have to try to do the best we can do. That makes us focus on the material aspect, or the low frequency aspect of the earth. They don't create it through bad behavior, if you want to call it that, or us being inconsiderate or being a poor parent. It's simply because our focus needs to be on the physical. That's why it creates karma. And then, of course, we start to worry about them when they get older. We've got jobs they're going to get, who they're going to marry, are they going to get themselves in trouble, they're going to move to different countries. And that creates karma as well, because it's us worrying about something they might do in this environment. So the only way to dissolve it is to detach from them. And that's extremely difficult. So, and I'm experiencing some of it right now with my brother. so even those individuals who've been around a long time, and Paramahansa Yogananda had trouble detaching from it as well with some of his his family members died as well. So it is difficult when you're here to detach from the things that are here, even though you know and you feel and you are detached, because there is a level of responsibility, and that's the karmic bit. It's the desire to help out those who you love. It also creates the karmic link. Next one, when a pure Om incarnates in our multiverse, is their test a sort of hybrid mixture of sources, sentient energies, and Om sentience to be able to work here? Now then, this is a good question, because it's that sort of answer has been given in the book about the Om, which has just been accepted for publication. They create a test to be able to incarnate. So they don't really have a test in the evolutionary cycle. They don't, because they're not part of the evolutionary cycle. They have a body of sentience and energy that they create to be able to enter into this multiversal environment. So it's basically, it's like creating a vehicle. Normally they're just sentience, but they have to create a mixture of sentience and energy to be able to enter into the multiverse, because it's part of the structure of the source, which is ultimately part of the structure of the origin. But we know that sentience is independent of energy, and the Om is just sentience. So they have to create this mixture of, well, if you want to call it a mixture, of sentience and energy, which we call a test, but they don't actually own a test themselves. How many lives did Yogananda have in human form? One guy we know said 39 lives. Let's have a look. What I'm being told is the number of lives it had doesn't really matter. And it's probably not answering the question, but it's saying that it was here for as long as it needed to be to do what it needed to do. And a figure of 39.9, irrespective of where it came from, would have been only partially accurate, because it didn't take into account other projections into the physical or the other parts of the multiverse from its tests. So when you talk about incarnations, we have to think about the projections of all the different aspects of a test as well in this instance. And I'm just looking to see, I'm picking up there's a possibility that the Yogananda test also wasn't always whole. So parts of it were somewhere else as well. So it's saying it's difficult to answer that question, even though it's, 39 lives was a figure. It's 39 lives that can be recorded. Okay. Next one. Oh, I think we're down to do the questions now, which is good. This is from Andrew. I'm reading a book called The Law of One, which suggests that evolution can occur through positive service to others. It can, and it does, but also through negative self-service. No. Negative self-service is usually doing things for the benefit of ourselves, even though it can potentially help others. It's the desire is to help ourselves. Thus, evil historical figures like Genghis Khan, Rasputin were actually able to ascend the dimensions above this one because they're so extremely polarized in a negative sense on Earth. Therefore, after disincarnating, they chose to continue their evolutionary path through self-servicing ways of manipulation, power, and conquest by joining higher social systems whose goal is negative self-service based evolution. I've never thought or heard of service of self could be an avenue for evolutionary exploration and expansion. What do you feel about this information? It would only create karma, basically. And karma is only created in the physical universe. So in effect, if you're doing something with the primary motive of serving yourself, not somebody else, even though it does serve them, then actually you wouldn't accelerate your evolution as such. You would help them and you would get some evolution, but you'd also get devolution, or you get karma, because you've created a thought process that is negative. So in essence, there is a level of progression, but there's also a level of regression and a level of karma that has to be addressed associated with it. So it's almost like taking one step forwards and two steps backwards. So I feel that it's a misunderstanding, although there are historical figures who have taken on board significant levels of, shall we say, negative energy or concern, such as these characters, such as other world leaders, including Hitler, who have worked in ways that are collective, that are negative, but have created a condition where we're collectively working together to work in a way which moves them out of their level of dominance, because it is universally recognized or globally recognized that we need to work in a different way to what's being presented by these people. So they work sometimes, they do create a condition where they are being of service, even though it looks like it's negative, because they're creating a focus for us to look at ourselves and realize that we don't want to go in that particular way. Okay, this is one from Rooney. I've got 10 minutes left looking at this. Wow. Okay. I have a scheduled surgery in 6 days where I'll be under general anesthetic. Given what we know from you, especially in the relation to the Andals, about the detrimental effects of anesthesia on the energy body and the aura, how do I best prepare to protect myself or optimize the experience I have to go through? Very simply, do your chakra opening exercises. If you don't know where they are, I can email them to you, or you can go onto the website, look for the About tab, go down to, and you'll see down there a list of bits and pieces, including some of my press page there, some press information, which is a bit out of date, probably significantly out of date actually, and you'll see the PDF file and the audio for opening the chakras. Do those exercises to open your chakras to make sure your frequency is higher, and that'll help your body to heal and also to cope with the lower frequency trauma associated with the surgery. But I'm feeling that you'll be fine. Let me know the date and the time, and I'll make sure that I'm there with you in giving you some healing and some high frequency protection. I've done it before for people, so it's not something new. And this is one from Andrew. I've read that there are 7 densities to conscious evolution. Humans are 3rd density entities. 3rd density means self-conscious. Next is 4th density, or the density of love and compassion. Then 5th is the density of wisdom. The 6th being the unification of love, and the 7th being the bridge to infinity. If this is a viable framework, then when humans ascend, does that mean that they are entering the 4th density existence to learn and experience love and experience in its fullest sense? Which of the 12 versions of Earth will be the 4th density entities incarnated into, or would it be that they've already evolved beyond the Earth entirely? These densities are in effect the same as me saying frequencies. So the 4th frequency is in effect the lowest of the astral levels, the lower astral. So, and again, the 4th density or 4th frequency is associated with the heart chakra. So hence the comment about the heart and about love. So the Earth is a pan-frequential body, and it exists in all of the frequencies. So there's one version in the first 3, and then there's 9 more frequencies. So there's 10 Earths. There's 9 more than this one. And it's not actually 10 Earths itself. It's just that there's a more content existing on these other frequencies on the Earth. So what we see here is just the cumulative effect of being in 3 frequencies together, the gross physical. If we go on to the 4th frequency, we still see this, but we see those who are existing on the 4th frequency level. So we see much more. So if you want to isolate yourself on the 4th level, or isolate yourself on the 5th level, for example, then that would be considered to be another Earth. So there's 10 Earths in total. This one's the first one, if you look at it logically speaking, and in order of sequential ascension through the frequencies. And then the 12th is the top one. And this one's from Eliza. As we raise our frequency as individuals, do we also alter our DNA? No, because it, as I said, doesn't affect the DNA. But what we do is affect our frequencies of our bodies, full stop. So we don't affect our DNA as such, but we do affect the way that the body interacts with this level. So it starts to become a higher frequency, it starts to become more attuned with the next level, the 4th frequency level. Next one, if I can get to this. Many say that when somebody dies, they experience basically what they want to experience, insofar as they aren't terribly fearful or confused by the dying process. My parents were very devout and loving Christians, and I would love nothing more for them to, upon leaving this incarnation, to go on and meet and greet people in Greek, met and greeted by Jesus. Is this possible? Does it happen for devotees of Christ or devotees of other religions and religious figures? Basically, we can. There's three ways of leaving this incarnation. One, we go into a state of complete grayness in limbo, because we haven't got anything we think exists. And it takes some time for us to come out, and our guide and helpers do a lot of work on us to reawaken and realize that we're still exist, but not in the body. Two, we can leave the incarnation totally conscious, and we go straight back into some level of communion with our true energetic self, or we stay projected from the true energetic self while we go through what classified as a life review, and therefore we we discuss with our guide and helpers the total incarnation process and how the communication process went. And actually, this is part of the lecture on this this Satsanga. So those of you who listen to the recording, I've already talked about it. And there are also those who project around them what they expect to see based upon their own programming in this incarnation. And that's probably the most difficult one to move out of, because being in limbo means that you're basically asleep, or you're in a grey situation and you're just in a state of beingness. Whereas when you're in, you've created an environment around you which supports what you think you should be at, it's difficult to move away from that. So the guide and helpers have a bit of a hard time to move it. Okay, so it can be one of those three things. The most difficult one to move away from is when we create an environment that we expect to see, because we totally believe it. Okay, got 4 minutes left. I've got 2 questions, I think. Okay. This is from Daniel. 15 minutes of grounding to the earth, like walking barefoot on the ground, will reduce pain and inflammation. Will this be beneficial to the human body? Yeah, walking barefoot is actually good, specifically in earth or grass. It's very grounding, and you don't have any insulation between you and your feet. So if you go and walk in a forest or a field, and you meditate on the connection of the earth energy to you, it's good for you, and it would increase your circulation. Good. And this one's from last one, hopefully, from Rooney. And this is probably to Andrew, actually. Andrew, I've studied both guys' work and a lot of one material extensively. If you or anyone else wish to discuss the material and how they overlap or differ, message Rooney. Yeah, please do contact Rooney. I think there's a lot more people know a lot more detail about the law of one and the entities surrounding it and the concepts surrounding it than I do. I tend to specialize in what I'm doing, which is how we do get further ahead, because if you specialize in what we're doing, then we go to more depth, whereas if we try to do more broadband things, then we don't go so deep. So do contact Rooney and share your ideas, and he'll share his thoughts. Okay, so thanks very much for all tuning in. Again, another marathon and a 100-meter sprint in one go. The lecture and the meditation are sort of linked together, so it's quite good. And I'm pleased with all of the questions we've got here as well, including those from people who couldn't make it. And I hope I've answered some of the questions. Probably they've been answered in a more sort of peripheral way rather than in-depth way. But what I'm picking up with some of them is that it's not specifically important to know what we think is important. It's important to know the concept behind it. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for dialing in, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next it'll be August, and I think it's around August the 20th. So we'll see what goes on. So anyway, much love to you all. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your dedication, and thank you for spreading the word on the greater reality and helping keep the planet higher frequency. We need you. Okay. Namaste to you all. Welcome to the meditation side of this Satsanga. And what we're going to do is to create another way to commune or connect with our true energetic self, which we sometimes call the oversoul, sometimes call it the Godhead, and we sometimes call it the higher self. All those words mean the same thing. I'm going to use a similar process to that which we experience when we leave the body. So as part of the demise process, or the part of the disincarnation process. We're not going to be disincarnate, by the way, but this is going to be another way, a visualization, if you like, of a way to commune with our higher self. And the reason why we're not going to detach from our bodies totally is because we're only going to move our sentience and not the sentience and the energy. So there's always going to be a link with the body. So just close your eyes, put your feet flat on the ground, back straight, hands palm uppermost on your upper thighs, closed eyes gently focused on the origin of the spiritual or the third eye. And I want you to visualize that you have a ball of energy, ball of bright white energy. It's actually sentience, just sitting behind the origin of the front heart chakra. This is your soul seat, the sentience associated with the soul seat. And from here, we don't need to go down to the Tantien because we're not going to detach the energy as well. We just need to move up, move this sentience, this ball of bright light, if you want to call that, this sentience only aspect of us, up through the spine, past the neck, up through the center of the head, and out through the hara line, which is in a similar location to the axis of the crown chakra. At this point, we're going to enter into what would appear to be a funnel. This funnel then brings us down to this hypodermically small tube. It takes us up past the 8th frequency, the 9th frequency, and the 10th frequency. And then we keep going faster and faster and higher in frequency, going through this tunnel until we eventually come out of the tunnel and enter into the pure brilliance or white light associated with the location within the multiverse that our true energetic self currently resides in as a function of its evolutionary level. So I've gone through this rather quickly, and you might want to replay this particular part of the recording to get used to it. But you've got used to doing meditations now anyway, so you should be able to jump straight into it. So don't forget, all the sentience goes up through the hara line, through the spine, through the neck, through the center of the head, up through the axis of the crown chakra, continues through this funnel that goes into the hypodermically thin tube that we call the hara line, up to and connecting with the true energetic self, which is residing on the frequency or universal level associated with its evolutionary level within the multiverse. So while you're here, you can ask to enter into a temporary level of communion. So the best way to experience communion is to enter into this much larger ball of sentience and energy, in this instance, that you may find in front of yourself, that your hara line is connected to. Like a small thin hair on a huge round ball. Move into this energy by moving through the hara line so that you're inside sentience and energy that is the true energetic self, the Godhead, oversoul or higher self. And just be there, stay there and be. If you wish, you can enter into dialogue, ask it questions, ask for answers to questions you need to answer in the gross physical. Ask for advice, ask for solutions, how to get solutions. Ask it to give you an experience. Ask it to give you the experience that is how it feels to be in communion with Source. How it feels to be in communion with itself, your Trinitic self. Ask it to surround you in its sentience, its total volume of its sentience, so you feel like you are it. You feel like you are your true energetic self, because at the moment you are. It's just that you're a temporarily individualized unit of its sentience. It's also got some of its energy that particular sentience is associated with in this evolutionary cycle. Stay here for a bit, engulfed in this immensely bright white light. This is the sentience of your true energetic self. It's giving you the feeling of communion with itself or with Source. Okay, you can extend this for as long as you like, but right now we should start to come back. So move yourself back towards the Hara line that is connecting your true energetic self with the small aspect that should be in your body, your incarnate vehicle, but is actually only connecting the energy. Move into this Hara line, move down this tube, coming down through the frequencies, away from the frequency associated with the universe that is within the multiverse. It indicates the evolutionary level of your true energetic self. Moving down the Hara line, down the frequencies until you come down to the 10th level, 9th and 8th. Then you come out of this funnel, you're back into the frequencies associated with the chakras. You move down through the Hara line, through the head, through the neck and the spine, and settle your sentience back in the soul seat. And so slowly come back into the room, slowly open your eyes, and slowly take a drink of water to help you ground yourself. This was just showing you the process. You can extend the length of time that you're inside in communion with your true energetic self as long as you like. You can make it 10 minutes, 20 minutes, hour, 2 hours, half a day if you wish, using the time to be in communion to help solve problems, feel more communion with your true energetic self, or even source, and allow yourself to become more expansive and higher frequency in the process. Okay, so thank you very much for entering into this World Satsanga on the 20th of July 2022, and I look forward to working with you all in August this year. Namaste to you all, God's love to you all, and do take care.